of presentations and prepare to finish phase 1 and then move into phase 2. So, and we'll have time to really talk about phase 2 as we get towards the end of this phase, and what the needs of the working groups will be and so forth. So I think we should get started and let's learn about small business and the impact of COVID-19 and where small business is and what it's going to take to bring small businesses back in a resilient and equitable way. And I will also remind the panel or the committee, the advisory committee members, when we get into the Q&A, because we have quite a bit of subject matter expertise on our advisory committee as it relates to small businesses. If you want to add something, we don't have as much of a time crunch. So if you want to add, something in that Q&A portion, please feel free to speak up. As always, when we get to the Q&A portion, because WebEx doesn't really allow you to raise your hand, if you can put a question in the chat or signal me in some way so that I can be sure to call on you. And Hannah always helps me with seeing everyone as well. We'll make sure that we try and get to your questions. Council President Hardin, welcome. Do you have any remarks you want to share with us today?
You know what? I'm going to leave it in the capable hands of our chair, Christy Angel. It is great to be with everyone this afternoon. Just one note again, as we talk about recovery and resiliency, we got to remember that we're still going through COVID. Today, we announced a stay-at-home advisory. Just want to encourage folks as we are talking with our family and friends. The next 7 days are very critical. That includes Thanksgiving. Yes, we are planning for what comes next, but we got to be the bridge to get there so that we all get there. So please take it seriously. I know everyone on this call is, but it's even harder when you're talking to your family and friends, especially about Thanksgiving. This is not the year. We have to do it differently. So that's all I would say. I look forward to being part of the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Council President. Okay, let's introduce our panelists. It looks like they are all here. Rhonda Watson Barber. Rhonda, do I see? I thought I saw you. I can't see everyone, so I apologize. Rhonda Watson Barber is with the 912 group and the Ohio MBE organization. Welcome, Rhonda. Rhonda has a long history of small business and minority business engagement, involvement, and we look forward to hearing her comments about small business and, recovery and resiliency. Our next panelist is Ron Day. Ron is, I believe you're the founder of Burger I Am, and you also are with the Urban Accelerator. Welcome, Ron. And then our third panelist is Henry. Henry, I have never said your last name right, so please forgive me. Is it Galat with the City of Columbus Office of Small Business and Entrepreneur Development. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you so much, Christy.
Yeah. So, Hannah, do we have any screen sharing or anything that we need to do today?
We do. I believe that Henry will have a presentation and Almar will be able to control that. He's got that capability all set up.
Okay, great. So let's start with, we have the three of you. I believe we're set up to have Rhonda start and share with us her thoughts around small business recovery, what she's seeing and experiencing, especially in the MBE community. Rhonda, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Christy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Rhonda Barber, and I'm the publisher of Ohio MBE. We're the state's largest Black-owned business newspaper. We post bid opportunities. Additionally, I operate the Ohio Business Development Center, where we train contractors. And in talking to our constituency, the issues for small, minority, and Black-owned businesses are access to capital, certification, access to decision makers, and contracts. I think the goal of the committee should be to intentionally bridge the wealth gap between minority and Black-owned businesses and the majority community. And some of those recommendations include programming where like companies are competing for contracts and resources together. Right now, you almost have apples and oranges are competing against one another, which creates a major disparity. The inclusion of micro enterprises should be into all facets of purchasing, which would include requirements for workforce and purchasing participation in all tax abatement and public and private partnership projects, establishing meaningful mentorship and apprenticeship programs for those entities receiving tax dollars. We need to go about creating avenues for particularly contractors to get training. A lot of contractors are really good at their craft, but they don't know how to run businesses. So I think if we've made a bridge or some meaningful mentorships with majority companies and Black-owned businesses, that may bridge the training gap. There needs to be a certification and purchasing programs for restored citizens. Those that are coming out of incarceration need to have programming and purchasing programs for them. Again, it's all about economic development and bridging the wealth gap. The goal should be to grow micro enterprises. And that's pretty much the issues that I see and the recommendations. And again, it should always be about economic development. All too often, issues that affect Black businesses, minority businesses, and women-owned businesses are put in a corner, and they're not a part of the overall economic development talk. So minority businesses and all the other Bs need to be incorporated into economic development strategies overall. So that's it for me, Christy.
Thank you, Rhonda. We appreciate that. And please, we're going to have, after Henry speaks, we're going to do some Q&A. So please stick around. I'll turn it over now to Ron Day. Ron, please share with us. I mean, your business, your Burger I Am is right downtown here. So obviously, you've been impacted not only probably by COVID-19, but you've been impacted, by the, stay-at-home orders and people going home and, not having as many employees downtown. And then, of course, with the social justice movement and some of the protests and things, you were right, at the epicenter of that as well. So share with us, not only on your downtown business, but then your urban accelerator, what you're seeing and then what you think it's going to take to kind of recover in a resilient way.
Well, first, thanks for inviting me to the call, you guys. I really, truly appreciate it. I'm going to try to talk in a way where big picture painting. So I don't necessarily have an answer per se, but big picture painting. Okay. So you mentioned I own Burger Room Gourmet Burgers and Bar. Burger Room is actually a franchise I purchased, and I blew it up to be what it is today, located downtown Columbus. And I also own Urban Accelerator X. Now, my biggest claim to fame for myself is I've been a trainer for 15 plus years. I train commission salespeople and also contractors, Ms. Rhonda. And in order to make the business grow to $15+ million a year, what I had to do is look at each individual differently, from the salesperson to the contractor. And that's one thing I feel that we're lacking in all the educational entrepreneur training spaces that we actually have, is that we have this textbook that say, hey, you need to be here. And at the end of the day, not everybody fits in that box. And especially in the urban community, it's a lot more difficult than someone may even think outside of the urban community. So the best way I can explain this, I'm going to tell a quick story. Okay. My brother is 33, I'm 40. So I'm his big brother, right? About 3 years ago, he calls me up and say, bro, I want to go out on my own and I want to open my own plumbing company. I said, great, please do it. Let's go. Let me help you with it. He said, I don't know nothing about business. I know everything about plumbing. I know nothing about business. And the first words of my mouth was, that's okay, bro. You don't have to know everything about running a business, because there's two types of entrepreneurs, in my opinion. You have those that can work in their business really, really well, and those that work on their business really, really well. Now, myself, I'm the guy that likes to work on his business. Big picture thinking, look at completely different 30-story view, look down at it. How can I make this thing grow? Thank goodness I think that way. That's why we still operating today downtown at the restaurant. But my brother, very good with his hands. But in today's world, today's technology can help you make your business look bigger than what it is, and a lot of other things. So the story I tell you is this. When he decided to open up his business, I told him, I said, bro, listen, not look like Chuck in the truck, okay? I need you to get a commercial vehicle, get the logos put on it, get a uniform, get payroll service, get schedulers, make your business look bigger than what it is so you can compete with the big boys. Now, mind you, he's in Los Angeles, so it's a lot of big companies out there that he's competing with, right? So fast forward 3 years later, I spoke to him at the beginning of the year before COVID hit, and he did over $250,000 last year. It's just him, one truck, but his business looks way bigger than it really truly is. I spoke to him a week ago when I was invited to this call. I said, where are you pacing in your business? He said, man, we should increase our overall revenue by at least 20% this year. Okay. I said, what are you doing different? He said, man, I'm just using the technology, bro, like you explained it to me. I don't stress about little things. I focus on my business, and I'm constantly working on a business, inside the business, and dealing with my customers the way I enjoy doing it. And all the technology behind the scenes, the QuickBooks and all these other things is helping him really build his business the way he wants to build his business. So let me fast forward now. Now we at Urban Accelerator X. Okay, Urban Accelerator X is a crazy brainchild of myself and my business partner, George. And the reason why we created Urban Accelerator X is very simple. In our culture, we all done been in a space where they say, anybody got any questions at the end? And no one raised their hand. Soon you can leave and you go get a cup of coffee because you was the presenter. You get 10 people surround you and say, I got a question for you, right? And the reason why is because we're a little embarrassed to raise our hand to ask that what we may think is a silly question, because we feel everybody in the room is smarter than what you really truly are, right? But that's not necessarily the case. Everybody has the same questions. So Urban Accelerator X is a place where you can come, let your hair down, and be you. So I'm an entrepreneur. People know who I am. I own a restaurant. I own other businesses. I own Urban Accelerator X. So it's easy for people to come to me and ask me a question because they're like, oh, Ron's cool. He down to earth. He ain't going to judge me. He looks like me. It's just an easier way of going about it. So I personally defy all traditional ways of looking at business initially. I believe we have to stop looking at small businesses as if they already at this level, if you want to call it this, and look at each individually differently to really identify their strengths and their weaknesses in order for them to really truly grow. So this COVID-19, this pandemic, the economic recovery that we in, only resilient people are really going to survive. But if we have the resources and we can deal with people at their level, they can make it. Not all people, not all small business owners, like Ms. Rhonda mentioned, they're really good at their thing, but they don't know nothing about business. We can teach them that. We can show them that. We can make it seem simpler and easier. But the thing about contractors, for example, Ms. Rhonda, you know this, we always want to talk over their head, and they don't necessarily understand. My brother is one of them, so I can say this, okay? I deal with him and I talk to him on a level that he gets, and that's how he's making his business very successful. So I don't necessarily have the answer for you guys when it comes to this. It's just my opinion and my thoughts about small business, and we got to stop looking at them as if they're already at this senior level and they're really at, a junior level. And we got to take that approach and build them up to the senior level. And if they can't, give them the resources that they may need to get them to the next level. So I hope that helped you guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ron. I appreciate that and appreciate the storytelling as well. Again, like Rhonda, please stick around when we have the panel discussion after Henry speaks. Henry? you are up next. And so in your experience and the work you're doing, Henry, share with us kind of what you think it's going to take for small businesses to recover in a resilient way.
So again, thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of background while we queue up the presentation on myself. I, as many of you might know, am a transplant to the city of Columbus. I came here a few years ago now and started working on what we call this inclusive entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship-based economic development. But my background is nothing new to me in that I came out of higher education, spent about 25 years doing community economic development work for the University of Arkansas, actually the University of Arkansas's Pine Bluff campus. So product of an HBCU, ran an incubator, actually envisioned an incubator similar to what Ron is doing, actually started it, envisioned it, did the fundraising, the whole 9 yards, and then managed it for about 10 to 12 years before leaving it. And it is important to connect with entrepreneurs. Throughout my journey, I got involved in entrepreneurship and even economic development for that matter in undergrad. Wandered into a newly found center that was being established on the university campus and immediately took a liking to this kind of work, community economic development, with the mindset of if my dad, my uncle had access to these types of resources that were being developed through the center, where could they have been? And my dad was a contractor. He and my uncle were contractors together, painters, didn't have the expertise and the knowledge around business, as Ron mentioned, that some of the counterparts that they grew up with and others they actually served as apprentices under had, and so it made for a difficult situation of taking and making the most of their businesses. So this work that I do it as part of the work that I'm charged with doing under the Office of Small Business and Entrepreneur Development with the City of Columbus, but it also is in my DNA. It's what I've done, as I said, for 25 years in terms of working with under-resourced small businesses. And so part of the work that we brought to the city was around that whole notion. We had just finished doing this work in Arkansas and some other markets, and upon coming into Columbus, we thought that it might have some benefit here as well. And so what we did, we created a campaign called Reimagining Small Business Initiatives for the city of Columbus. And of course, it's housed in Director Stevens, he's on the call here, but it's housed in the Department of Development. We rebranded the Office of Financial Assistance, as it was called, to become this laser-focused office around small business development. And so in regards to that, we launched this thing in 2019, somewhat similar to what's happening here today. We launched it in 2019. The campaign itself, the mayor did a kickoff. We actually formulated a board of advisory similar to what you have here now. And I'm happy to actually see that Michael Smithson is on this call and he's on your board as well, Christy. But he was a part of that. As well, we are also aligned with the work that the county is doing in the Innovation Council. And as to that, we also see Michael, doggone it, I can't think of the name right now, there as well, who's on this call as well, who's a part of that advisory commission with Franklin County. Next slide there, please. So there you see, inclusive of Auto Betty, of course, and several of the others that you'll recognize there. What we did in formulating this advisory committee to advise us on how to build this ecosystem, we were looking at not only small businesses, of course, they are represented there, but also we looked at educational institutions. How do we make better use of Ohio State and some of the others? How do we bring our CDFIs more closer to the work of Main Street lending and small business lending? That's not something that they've always done. But also looking at civic organizations such as One Columbus, Sean Grant represented One Columbus, and the like. And so it was a pretty robust group of people that we assembled, similar, and as I said, similar to what you've done here. Next slide, please. So we took a multi-pronged approach, a multi-phased approach to this work. Again, similarly to what you're doing. Phase one was January to June. We did a deep dive. We didn't want to assume anything. We wanted to actually hear from small businesses. We did focus groups in every corner of the city where we went and sat down with them before COVID and was able to hear their reflections on what has their journey been, what is your pain points, what are things that we can do differently and better as we build out a system. We also looked at capital support analysis. We did this across not only Columbus, but we looked at nationally, what does it look like in terms of access to capital for women and minority-owned businesses in particular, because we know you can't grow if you don't have access to capital. And then the third thing we did in phase one, we benchmarked what we were doing against best practices, not only locally again, but in peer cities. And we identified peer cities based upon demographics, projected profiles going forward in terms of growth patterns, industry clusters represented, and the like. And so we wanted to make sure that we wasn't making decisions in a vacuum, but actually was being considerate of regional stakeholders, best practice peer cities, and the like. And then that rolled us over into what we call phase two. Phase two, we actually looked at developing what we call a framework for this work, so that it would be anchored one way or the other in terms of how we would go forward. And so as a result of that, we identified the gaps, and then we put forth the framework, and then ultimately we introduced the city-sponsored small business agenda, what we call the strategy document for our work going forward. Next slide, please. Out of the work that we did in terms of assessment and the framework and engaging with our stakeholders, inclusive of our advisory committee, we walked away with, I guess it was probably about 25 gaps that we identified holistically throughout the system. But we've narrowed those down and rolled them up into 4 key takeaways. And these are the takeaways that we find that are, something that I think we all should continually work forward, solving and addressing in any form that we take. One being limited access or limited awareness to existing resources available to small businesses. You find oftentimes in minority communities or communities of colors that adage is $1 short and a day late. We find out about things almost when it's too late to even make use of it. And so having a system and having a process where we keep people up to speed in terms of what's available, what's coming down the pike, how they can access it, that's really critical and vital to growing an equitable ecosystem and an equitable economy. The next thing we saw was there was a need for post-launch support for businesses to be able to scale and grow. As we think about looking at our industry cluster analysis, we picked out about 7 clusters that we see and saw that was actually an entrepreneur was able to start a business and then scale that business out of a neighborhood to a region here in Columbus and surrounding counties. Basically, we wanted to make sure that we were putting those businesses in the best position to be successful. But minority and women-owned businesses need a lot of support after they get started. It's not enough. Anybody can get an LLC. Anybody can get a deck of cards, but you got to have some support. And you got to have somebody that's working with you, as Ron mentioned, to help guide you to the next level and really maximize the opportunity. So that's something we think is still needed and needed in greater fashion as it relates to gaps that we saw in takeaways. The next thing we saw was disproportionate challenges in accessing capital. We all know it. I packaged loans for many, many years. Actually, it was part of my acknowledgement by the Small Business Administration at one time for having packaged some $14-20 million in loans for the Arkansas region. But if you don't have access to capital, you can't grow. And so when we look at that, we were able to, pre-COVID, determine what the real capital gap is for the city of Columbus. It's pretty significant. It is not the city can't meet that need by itself. The county can't meet it by itself, but we need our stakeholders to be aware of that need and then be working toward it. So that's certainly something we should take forward as we go through the work that you guys are doing. And then the last takeaway was entrepreneur support organizations and capital providers struggle to reach small businesses in underserved, under-resourced neighborhoods. we need to have a holistic place-based approach. If you're going to work with entrepreneurs of color or under-resourced entrepreneurs, they often come from under-resourced neighborhoods. And so you got to be able to be where they are in order to make a difference. And so we have some strategies and recommendations around a place-based approach to how we would do that. Next slide, please. So again, taking all of this input, looking at the data, looking at stakeholder engagement, we crafted what we would call the small business agenda. And we were very intentional about that in that we actually affixed a mission and a vision. We crowdsourced that with the advisory committee and with entrepreneurs. And I'll just take the liberty to just, read this a little bit and just give you a feel for what we're trying to do with the small business agenda. The mission of the Columbus Small Business Agenda is to cultivate an inclusive, dynamic, and continuously improving small business ecosystem that enables all entrepreneurs to enjoy equitable opportunities for success that contributes to local economic development outcomes. I think, Rhonda, you mentioned that, and that is important to lift up that we're not just doing this as a social program. We've got to move beyond working with minority businesses as a social outcome. And as much as it's a social outcome, it is economic development. It's entrepreneurship-based economic development. And then the vision of the work is we envision a coordinated, connected, and vibrant network that affords small businesses, in particular entrepreneurs of color, the opportunity to start, sustain, and scale to create economic empowerment for all. And so that's the small business agenda and the mission and the vision as so articulated. Next slide, please. Where we are now, as I said, after we set forth the agenda, rolled it out on December last year, almost a year. The last year we've been working on 4 strategic themes. One was, as we just talked about, expand awareness of resources. And each one of these, before I go any further, each one of these strategic pillars have been anchored and pushed forward in the community by what we call ecosystem builders. So we've got, an ecosystem builder for each one of these that is charged with pulling people together in terms of committees and working to advance and provide year-over-year strategies to offer up to city government and others to say, look, this is something we think needs to be funded and advanced. And so the first one, as I said, expand awareness and resources of resources. The second one, build capacity of ecosystem stakeholders. The third one being improved services and capital provisions. And then the fourth one being connectivity to anchors in the community to, small business need customers, and the city is certainly one of those. To that end, we've been working to advance these 4 pillars and have made some progress in that regard. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've made some progress on, and of course, it was expedited by the need surrounding COVID-19. So we quickly moved, actually started putting the pieces together in March. We funded this actually and rolled it out in June, but it's the Columbus Franklin County COVID-19 Small Business Response and Recovery Fund, a long name, but very impactful in that we were able to award some $8.5 million in funding to almost 1,980 small business owners in Columbus. We were very intentional about it. We wanted to make sure in round 1 that we reached those businesses that were originating from under-resourced neighborhoods, the Linden, the Mount Vernons of the Columbus. And so we were able to do that. We actually also, this fund allowed us to, actualize and mobilize what we talked about in the small business agenda. It is collaborative. It is the city and the county having come together. The city put money in, the county put money in. We used neighborhood referral partners to drill deep into the neighborhood. And then we used a network of small business support organizations to provide technical assistance. You'll see there, we did 100%. The funding went to kind of what we call LMI kinds of businesses for the most part. We also did 80% went to minority-owned businesses. And then we were very proud of the fact that out of that 8.5 million, 68, almost 70% of the money went to Black-owned businesses, and then another 43% went to women. And I'll just stop there, and because there's a lot that can be done. I will skip down, if you would advance us to slide 10 really quick. and then I'll end my remarks there. Right there. So thank you so much. So the path forward, what we offer up is what we're doing that might be instructional for you in your work is one, we're moving forward with what we call a branded community, a branded portal, online portal where businesses can interact and understand and get information and, establish the relationships that are necessary to grow and expand. COVID makes that even more apparent that we need an online presence in as much as we need the brick and mortar. So that's something that we're doing. We're also looking at how do we develop more cultural competency in our network of service providers. I put many minority businesses before majority bankers only to be disappointed or for them to be disappointed because oftentimes putting those situations don't often understand the cultural competency necessary to help a minority business advance. And so we want to do things to move that forward. We also think that what you don't measure, it just doesn't get counted. And so we want to develop out a data center centric to our own data, using the fund and the impacts of the fund and the businesses impacted by the fund to begin to do year-over-year assessments of where are we at? Are we really moving the needle as it relates to minority businesses? And yeah, there's some information that you can, Census of Business reports and national databases that you can subscribe to, but there's nothing like looking at your own data and saying, okay, yeah, I can see how we are improving access to capital for our businesses and measure that in an aggregated way and not in a siloed individual agency by agency perspective. So, and then the last thing I'll lift up is we're looking at what does it take to move this work forward in terms of operational capacity. We believe that there's a need for what we call a backbone organization that would take this work and be handed these assets that we're developing out and then be in a position to move that work forward in a more objective kind of way. The city can do certain things, the county can do certain things, but an organization that's charged with this day over day can do a whole lot, and they would be in a better position to solicit funding from the philanthropic community than the city can. So with that, I'll end. One of the things the mayor says and rolling this out is that we must reimagine small business to create economic empowerment for all. And so that is the work of the small business agenda. And I think it aligns very well with what's being proposed for the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you, Henry. So now I want to make sure that Rhonda, Ron, and Henry all you're unmuted and prepared to answer questions. It's 4:04, and so to the committee, perhaps if we go to 4:15, 4:20 with some questions, that'll leave the last 45 minutes for us to talk with Kinston a bit about the rest of the remaining work that we have ahead of us. So I will open the floor and allow the committee to ask some questions. Any? Floor is yours.
Hello, Christy.
Hello there. Hi, Celeste.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you again. I have a couple of questions and concerns with the presentation. I'm glad that I'm here, especially the small business development, where I heard the panelists and presentation. Even the City of Columbus Small Business Agenda, one big, community that the New Americans has been I feel that we have been set aside because, the growth of New Americans population here in Columbus contributes to the richness of our city and also enhances the economic and community development. So I don't see that, embracing even in the focus group discussion or presentation. Even we don't know about this organizations group that is really developing the city of Columbus. I see that in the presentation that even entrepreneurs capital access have difficulties to reach out to small businesses because that they are not working in the right way. We can open the door for because the small business and the New Americans are really struggling in this emergency situation. They don't have access to capital. They don't have even know how to fill unemployment because of they lost all their clients and they closed their businesses. And I feel that, they are really disconnected from the city small business or the Columbus Small Business Development or agenda. So I want to how the panelists look at that to embrace in the future. And at the same time, really, I want to make that voice that, New Americans has to be included, the cultural competence, the access to resources. And I like that coalition idea, which is what they are lacking for. There are so many things that really we will embrace, and then we can be part of it.
Thank you for that question. I'll throw that back out to the panelists if you want to address some of those questions, including how to embrace new Americans, how to give them access to resources and include them in the agenda, so to speak.
So I'll take that. Thanks for the question and lifting that up. We did in terms of trying to reach out. We reached out, as I said, in all four quadrants of the city. We have met with several individual groups, representative of different ethnicities, inclusive of the Somali community, to be honest with you. But going forward, we do think that there is an opportunity for us to bridge our training, and we talk about building the capacity of ESOs. Certainly, with that in mind, we want to be able to reach, as we always talk about, if we don't reach everybody, we don't reach nobody. So we need to make sure that we're inclusive. One way to do that is through the training that we'll be doing as it relates to capacity building for ESO organizations.
Thank you.
I have.
Nana, and then Sandy Doyle Ahern, you're on deck. Nana?
Okay, thank you so much, Chairwoman Angel, and thanks for getting me on. I thought I'd never get on. Thanks, Hannah. Henry, I have two questions for you. First of all, the path forward and those companies that were listed, what do they do? Do they support you? Do they give you funding? What is their role?
So to date, they have funded some aspect of the work, rather through the city, or most of these are funding going to the county, actually, to be honest with you, in the Forward Cities work. And so the city has by and large funded their work solely, with the exception of the fund, which again was a combination of Franklin County and JP Morgan Chase put funding into the city's work. But the representative logos that you see on that slide, the path forward, is really respective of the combination work that the city and the county is doing, with most of the funding having gone to the county for the Forward Cities work.
Okay, I thank you for that. I wonder how much do those companies spend with Black businesses? The NAACP is always concerned when entities take money and they want to engage Black businesses. So the question from the NAACP is, how much money do those entities spend, and how does their board and their staff look? How many Blacks do they have on their board? How many Blacks do they have in key management? We always ask that question, and certainly we encourage the city to begin to ask the same. That's number one. Number two is, and I want to go back, Rev One, that's the company that I really would like for you to take a deeper dive in, because we've taken a deep, deep dive, and we're really not impressed with what they have done with Black businesses. Now, I want to go back to, this seems like an overlap with the county and the city. Are you all working together, or how is that working? Because I'm engaged with the county on similar projects. It seems to me there's an overlap, or somebody's not talking to someone, and that causes confusion in the community. And I just wonder, how are you and the county going to work together to make this all happen?
So thanks again for the question. And one of the things we did early on, we launched our program probably, like I said, in February, so January of last year. The county followed soon thereafter. So one of the first things we did in that regard was we invited the county to participate as one of our advisors. You go back to slide 3 or 4, whatever, on the slide deck, and you saw Keena Smith as part of our advisory committee. If you were to look at their slide deck in terms of their innovation, what they call the Innovation Council, you'll see that I sit on their Innovation Council as well. We started out this work thinking about the same population group. We've continued to work collaboratively around that. What we are doing now, just to answer your question, is we're looking at how does these initiatives merge together, the city and the county, across all of the stakeholders and partners. As I said, the whole idea around, the work streams that I mentioned in terms of outcomes that we want to see within the next year are things that we are mutually aligned on, and even to the point of the backbone type of organization. So there is conversation. We're actually working on a document now that looks to merge our efforts together in some shape, form, or fashion. But yeah, we want to make sure that we're getting economies of scale. There might not always be a total alignment, but definitely as it relates to where we're trying to go here now, we're looking at how do we do this together, and how do we get the type of resources to the people that we both want to serve in a meaningful way.
Because it appears sometimes that the city and the county are in competition. So I will hope that you would work very hardly, and those in the administration work very hard, because that's how it's perceived. And I'm going to work very hard to bring that together, because it's not looking good. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana. I'm going to turn it over to Sandy Doyle-Ahern has a question. Sandy?
Hi, everybody. First of all, just thank you to the panelists. My question really is for everybody, but maybe a little bit for Ron. So Ron, I have to tell you that your comments speak greatly to me. I am a business owner. I understand completely what you mean about people are passionate about what they know, but when they get into the business of the business, there's often a huge learning curve. And I can state that because I went through it, and it's not easy. Somehow it's still working out. My question for you really, and maybe for everybody, is as we think through options for recovery, one of my observations in mentoring other business owners has been a lot of questions around administering their business, tax training, HR and employment issues, insurance issues, shareholder agreements, things like that. I mean, the number of issues that business owners face is tremendous. And I'm trying to think through how private sectors can come together to support this more, particularly around mentoring and training. So I'm curious about your opinion. While there's a lot of great public resources available and what Henry's talking about is tremendous, I also feel like the private sector needs to do a better job with whether it's outreach or availability for mentoring. And I'm curious if you would agree with that or don't think it's necessary, or if you have a thought on that.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. One of the things that I've been trying to work on at Urban Accelerator X is creating a Rolodex of subject matter experts, so we can at least have somebody we can lean on for even initial conversation. Then at that point, as a small business owner, you can choose to go right or left, whatever you decide to do. But there's always that initial question that you need answered. I'll give you a quick example real quick. I had to hire 3 attorneys to open up my restaurant. A franchise attorney, a liquor attorney for my liquor license, and also a real estate attorney to make sure that I wasn't getting raked over on my lease, right? But when you tell the average person you got to hire 3 attorneys, they automatically turn gray in the face and sit down and say, never mind, I'm cool, I don't want to do that.
Yep.
Was it difficult? Yes. But did I get through it? Yes. So, but now I'm a subject matter expert about should you hire an attorney or not, right? So now you can ask me those questions. I can give you free advice. You still got to go do the work, but I can kind of lead you a little bit on the path I took in order before you can help yourself. So yes, I agree with you. Hope that answered your question.
It does. I guess I maybe sometime we can speak offline too, because and Christy, I know I mean to get ahead, but I think there's some really robust ideas that could come out of this, and maybe as a group we can think through some of those. So thank you.
Thank you for your question.
And Sandy, and to others, and to our panelists, this is our first phase. It's kind of a learning phase, and so when we go into our second phase, which is a working, not that we're not working, but more of a roll up the sleeves and start to throw the spaghetti on the wall, so to speak, and see what works. We may ask that, we have an opportunity to speak with you again or follow up with you, because as ideas are generated through this process, it then will be incumbent upon us to talk about those ideas in a, deeper way, and to start putting some recommendations together for the outcome. So, Ron, we may be coming back to you. Yes, Council President.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Sandy was saying about like that technical, that mentorship support. And the question is, should the private sector, can they step up to play that role? I also think that we in the government have to do a little bit more there as well. As proud as I am of our small business program this summer that rolled out the $8.6 million, there were about 1,500 small businesses that applied. 49.6% of the small and minority businesses that applied could not get the loans because they were tax delinquent or had never paid city taxes. And for me, and talking with the auditor, that's a glaring hole and opportunity to work with those small businesses, because that means that they can't take part really in any of the conversations we're talking about, or anything that we would put forward in the future that would have government funds until we fix that hole. And I think that's a real opportunity for the private sector, but also for government to kind of step up and work with those businesses as well.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you on that. So, there's certainly more to come. I know we're keeping track of many of these, ideas as well. So these will come forward in our working session. I want to let Melissa Johnson has a question. Melissa?
Hi, yes. I had a question, and kind of Sandy kind of touched on it already. I had wanted to ask the question while she was talking, but to Ron, and I think it was Henry, in regards to like creating hubs or building relationships in certain industries, do you find that, experienced private businesses who would be willing to mentor other businesses, do you feel like if government supported that, or if community was behind that model?
Hey, Melissa, it's Rhonda. And that's one of my recommendations, is that meaningful mentorship and apprenticeship programs should be established. If the city is an owner on a project, they can dictate terms. So they can say, hey, we're going to give a general contractor, we're going to give you this project, but you also have to mentor some contractors in the process. It's not just about getting a paycheck. It's about giving some contractors some tangible skills so they can take their businesses to the next level.
Thank you, Rhonda. Melissa, do you have a follow-up?
No, yeah, I that was, and even when Ron was talking about how he was working with his brother. Sometimes I find, like, even in our industry, we focus on children and families, and I work with probably about 20 childcare centers right now, and it's because we have that relationship with one another, and we're building that relationship with each other. It helps us to increase the quality in our business. And so just, hearing what Ron was saying about, working with people that just trying to see if you all would agree that is a model that we should be looking towards.
Absolutely. I just think we need to have an entry point to entrepreneurship. And that's what my company, Urban Accelerator X, is all about. It's just, hey, go over there, go get a free consultation for an hour, figure out where you're trying to go take your business. Urban Accelerator X may be for you, but another organization in town may be for you. And what we're trying to do is create relationships with all the training centers in town to say, hey, you know what, you in tech, we don't really do tech here. We do more Main Street type of stuff. You know what, you need to go over here to such and such, and they can probably get you closer to where you want to be on the tech side. But if you just want to get real hands-on skill set on this day-to-day operation, how you should run your business, we can teach you the I guess you want to call it entrepreneur one-on-ones that you may need in order to keep your business moving in the direction that you want it to go. So, like, the best way I can put it is, when I was growing up, I wanted to learn how to swim. We went to the YMCA, right? I want Urban Accelerator X to be the YMCA of entry-level entrepreneurship. That way we can build you up and get you to the point you need to be at.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing to that really quick. Entrepreneurship is a journey. You don't get there overnight. Anybody tell you that they do, they're probably not being honest with you. It's a process. You start out in one level and you grow. And it's Bill Clinton used to always say, if you see a turtle sitting on a fence post, he didn't get there by himself. So all of it is a part of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Elizabeth Martinez, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So one, I just wanted to acknowledge that I think Ron has given us a lot to consider, having his voice represented here, specifically to lift up his message around that as we think about access to the resources, we also need to be considering targeting messages and individualizing support in ways that connects with the communities that we want to provide support to. But Henry, I had a follow-up question on your last slide when you were sharing with the group the path forward, some consideration around local aggregated data that could help inform whether some of the strategies that we have in place right now are actually moving the needle. Just a point of clarity, are you suggesting that we don't have data, or is it just looking at building out more robust data for us to analyze?
I think it's a little bit both. In some cases, you got the data, but in other cases, it's something that it's an additive, it's a net add. For instance, if you think about what we're trying to do with the Small Business COVID Fund, what we did with the fund, now we know, we didn't know this before, nobody knew this before, how many small businesses, as the council president just alluded to, that were not in compliance with the city's income tax requirement, or the state's, actually it's the state's requirement. That kind of data should be monitored. You can't assist people without knowing where they're coming from and what the actual need is. And so there are some avenues where data is there, there's others where it's not. And the other more important piece of that is when you think about what's happening, and this is more not so much for City of Columbus, this is actually a federal something that probably Congresswoman Beatty might want to weigh in on. When you think about the Small Business Administration and their funding of certain programs, they fund the Women's Business Center, they fund other, SBDC kinds of operations. And then you got other funding mechanisms. Department of Commerce might fund incubators, accelerators, or something to that nature, but they don't always compare data with data. And so, you might have the data being collected by this silo organization that is funded by this federal agency or the other, that's not necessarily comparing and talking that, sharing that data in a meaningful way with the others. And so same thing when you think about banking and access to financing. So if the city or the county or combination thereof can do something that aggregates this information in a meaningful way and localizes it, we begin to be able to have a trend line that we can follow and see if we really are moving the needle.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Elizabeth. Mark Swanson.
Hi. Yeah, I had just a couple comments, observation. One is when Ron was talking about in terms of being an entrepreneur and understanding your team, it reminded me a lot of a book I read by James Collins called Built to Last. He also wrote Good to Great. And it's basically the idea of in your top tier of your team, you want to make sure that you have the right people first. But sometimes their skill sets might be better served in a different role. And I think these are important things for that mentorship in order to do better with regular frontline workforce development. The second thought I had was I would love to be involved in a co-mentoring. In other words, learn from folks that are having trouble getting through the system and getting their great ideas to market, because I believe that's going to open up a meaningful but complicated discussion about form-based code, about zoning, about area commissions, and all kinds of things that end up being a barrier to folks who don't have 3 attorneys to help them navigate something. And I just wonder if that would ever be in the scope of our work together.
Mark, I think that you raised some good points. And on the working group, these are things that we should also be talking about. because especially when you get into, and you say form-based code and all of that, and these are things that Sandy and I, our eyes light up because we kind of geek out on this, but these are things that often aren't, they're not taught. You learn through trial and error, and you sometimes businesses spend a lot of money before they realize that the business they want to open up in the location that is ideal for them is not possible, because of all these other things, right? So I think we should definitely note the things that you're raising. You've got some hands-on experience, especially bringing real estate and so forth, and we should put this on the table to be discussed in our working group. I don't know if Mike Stevens or others want to comment on that as well. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just one final thought is that there seems to be, we have to find a way to do this baseline up, right? Something that really impressed me in our very first meetings when we were talking about going back to the good old days weren't so good for so many folks. And so we got to fix some of that, right? All of it. But we also have to take a look at the top, how our laws, codes are written, and see what barriers those are providing, are causing for ceilings to be hit all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, but thank you for letting me talk.
You're exactly right. No, you're exactly right. Are there other questions from the panelists? I also want to give Keith Stevens is with us, and Keith is a successful entrepreneur, but he also is the president, current board chair of the chamber. Keith, did you want to add any comments here? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am going to put you on the spot because you've been an entrepreneur for a long time. So
yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. I was trying to hide out, Christy. Thank you. No, a couple things. I do wear a couple different hats. So first, Keith Stevens. I'm founder and chairman CEO of PSI. We're a technology consulting firm based here in Columbus. In addition, I am a 49% owner in Acava. It's a San Francisco software engineering studio. And then we've got another business we've reimagined here in Columbus that actually is we're working with nonprofits now, but it's really about shoring up their non-core support, right? And doing it at a price point they can afford, kind of a cafeteria or menu-driven piece. And we've got some great pilots going. We're hard launching in January. So as I listen to this, and we actually have onboarded a couple of for-profit small businesses as well, who lack that back office expertise, right? Whether it's marketing, we play in 6 functional areas, and I won't give you a commercial, more to come in January. But I really understand this. Henry called out the fact we were part of innovation, the Forward Cities Innovation Council, and this conversation took place there. I give Henry kudos. I met him, 3 years ago at GBQ, I think when he first showed up in Columbus. He still had South Carolina or North Carolina on him. But at any rate, one of the things we took away from that meeting after he left was that the commitment was there, the experience was there. And so just kudos to Henry for all the work he's done. Rhonda Barber's been a stalwart in this community forever, supporting minority businesses. So thanks to her. And to Ron, just really loving the hustle, Ron, and what you're doing. And I think, we need more people hustling and grinding like you're doing. So your message is resonating. From the chamber side, the chamber supported the ecosystem effort of Henry by doing some of that vetting of applications from those companies that were interested in getting those funds. What we've also done is stood up a DE&I committee. We've not gone really public yet. We're doing an internal audit of our board, of our staff and our members to really understand that whole implicit bias piece and not go out and start making claims to do things that we really don't understand yet. What's come along the way, though, there's a conversation happening now. I won't say too much about it, but there is some mentoring where we can tie our members to these small Black-owned businesses, and we're focused on Black-owned businesses now, and help them from the standpoint of mentoring, technical support, and hopefully access to contracts. That is a pilot. So we're not sure, time will tell whether that gets legs. But the thing that I'm really impressed with is just this city and how they pull together and moving through this pandemic crisis along with the social unrest. My one question, and I brought this up before, is probably more a comment, but when I think about when I started my company, I had $500. My office was a bus bench and a payphone on Main Street. That was my office when I started. And I think about all the resources that were there then, and it wasn't as many as now, but there was never one place I could go that I could get all my questions answered. We've got duplication of effort. I think Nana was kind of referring to that with the county and the city, but there's some duplication of effort. Everybody's intentions are great, but it would be great if we had a clearinghouse where I, as a small business owner who's having challenges, I could go one place and be exposed to all the resources in the city as opposed to having to knock on 15 doors. So my question, I guess, for Henry is part of the ecosystem, does it, and I think we've had this conversation before, so I hate to put you on the spot with it, on the spot with a different audience, but is that part of the plan where out of this work, a small business, micro entrepreneur, solopreneur, or any small business struggling, specifically minority business, can intersect with that and get the help they need, get pointed in the direction and not have to knock on 15 doors?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. That's actually a good question. Two things we're doing in that regard that I think bring some clarity and shore up that whole opportunity. One is the hub, the online hub. As I mentioned before, we want to build out a community of sort where all of those resources are available, that have been vetted and proven. You're not sending people down dark holes and with no end. That's something that's frustrating to the entrepreneur. And as you said, you don't want to sit around in circles. So that's a piece of it. The online hub portal, we're actually looking at trying to launch that the first quarter of next year to make that available. The other piece is around, while we would like to see we'd like to see a single source place, but what's more important is that these organizations are communicating and talking with each other. We don't have a lot of tolerance as we move forward for aggregated outcomes. Everybody wants to be great, and we're not talking very well together. So that backbone organization will allow us to aggregate and pull together and communicate to the small business community in a meaningful way to where they're not, going in circles trying to find the right resources. So that's two-pronged. One is the online community, and then the other one is the state-owned organization. Could be a new corp, could be something that emerges out of some of the work that's already been done or being done by some organization that's already in the marketplace. But basically, that organization would be charged with day over day reporting out, providing assistance and monitoring how we are being effective in that regard around small business development. That's what has happened with the broader economic development piece. I think that's something that needs to happen in the small business sphere.
Thank you, Henry. Ariana has a question, and so I want to give you, Ariana, the opportunity to ask maybe the final question, and then we will have Kinston take us into just asking these last few questions. But before you ask the question, the one thing I would say, Henry, you mentioned some benchmarking against peer cities, and I know that I think Forward Cities has done something similar. Maybe the county has done something similar. And so what I would ask is that our working group gets the benefit of that data, so that we can see what peer cities are doing. And those cities that have built strong ecosystems for small businesses, there's no sense in us reinventing the wheel. And if that data has been reviewed by these other entities, if we have the opportunity to look at that and look at perhaps what hasn't been given the green light, say it that way, and some things that we can also promote. So Hannah, maybe that's something we can work on, Hannah and Mike and I, to get that data. And Ariana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, ma'am. I've been around small business for most of my career, and to Keith's point, to a lot of what Ron was saying, there are so many organizations that are already doing incredible work. The problem is that a lot of them use the majority of their funding for operations, right? Depending on their funding, they may not be able to actually use any of it for marketing. So I wonder if there's, to not reinvent the wheel. Like, I like this idea, Henry, that you guys are, this portal. And do we need a point person? Like, can that money instead be earmarked for these organizations or for this portal to get the word out that these organizations exist? Like, I worked at the SBDC and I ran it for a few years. Every client that came through our door, the consistent message was, I wish I would have known about you guys earlier. I didn't know you guys existed. And then this is an incredible resource. And there are all of these, right? Like the Urban League, Rhonda. There's so many incredible organizations that if we were able to support them in getting the word out to the community that they exist, that could be an effective use of funding. There's also an organization out in Colorado called Startup Colorado that they're doing something similar where they have essentially, they've pulled together all the resources and almost operate as a LinkedIn, but specifically for Colorado, for specific organizations where if I, as a business advisor or a business coach, can go in and create certain groups, and then businesses can come in and I can actually provide any kind of support, so that I'm also acting as a liaison for, because being in the work, who's best, right? Like, I know who what folks to send Rhonda to. I know what folks to send to ECDI. I know what folks to send to other organizations that are doing the same type of work that we're doing. I think that we just all get to, there has to be a way for us to maximize all the talent that we have in this city.
So to that point, you're right. And again, I'll point back to the fund that we just wrote out. We were able to bring together all of those organizations you just mentioned as different parts of the clog in the wheel, if you will, to do different functions. So we know it exists. We know we can do it because we just finished doing it, and we deployed the funding in a really good way, develop relationship with small businesses in doing so. And so, that's the other piece. You got to create connections to the small businesses. It's not enough to create relationship, mutual admiration society among TA providers. You got to be able to, you're only as good as the entrepreneurs that you're supporting and what they have in terms of their advancement in their work in their businesses. So to that end, the portal will speak to some of that, but also part of the work stream and working committee number one is to look at how do we brand and market this work going forward, collectively, not individually, but collectively. The small business agenda, the portal itself will have its own branding around it, but basically being able to maximize the branding element of the work so that we get the word out to who we need to get it out to. In the interim, we've started a Facebook page called the Columbus Small Business Agenda to just kind of get the consumer base as well as the small businesses, kind of used to going to a centralized place to hear about resources and things of that nature. So the Columbus Small Business Agenda Facebook page, you feel free to check it out, like it. But that's an interim step to get people kind of used to looking for information from this body of work that could easily be converted and ported over to the portal once we launch it.
Thank you, Henry. I know I said last question, but Tashia Stafford had one quick question about youth. So Tashia, I want you to be able to share that.
Thank you, Christy. I'm excited to be on a call with individuals that get it at hello. If we would go around the room and ask the question, how important are small business to our communities? I know we would all raise our hand and say yes. I was curious to understand where have youth been in the conversation? So have there been any discussions on creating pathways for youth so that later on we have a pipeline for entrepreneurs, specifically young Black entrepreneurs, so that I think was a great story that Ron shared, working on the business versus working in the business. We have a lot of young people that are not skill set, maybe not suited for college off of the bat. They may be in the trade. So I would be curious to where those conversations have been, if at all.
I'll just go. The city certainly sees the value in building out that pipeline. I know Office of Diversity and Inclusion has included that in part of their work to build the pipeline of the new entrepreneurs, working with the downtown high school and some of the other establishments. Just today, Council Member Tyson, I think, is sponsored or at least provided funding for the Girls Summit of sort. That's not the name, forgive me for that, but something of that nature. That's
the Commission on Black Girls.
Yeah, that's speaking to the whole notion of entrepreneurship as part of that conversation. So, it's highly important that we invest in our youth because they'll be the entrepreneurs of the day and of tomorrow. And we just don't want to leave them in a position where they're not ready to take that step. So I'm a big advocate for youth entrepreneurship.
The Ohio Business Development Center will be hosting a youth entrepreneur camp during that Christmas holiday break, and more information will be posted on our website and in Ohio MBE.
Thank you, Rhonda. Okay. To our panelists, thank you for joining us today. I told you all this would be a robust conversation. That's why we couldn't split it with government, because that'll be a robust conversation as well. So thank you all for being here with us today. And I'm going to turn this over to Kinston so he can guide us through a few of these questions and we get some feedback before we close out at 5 o'clock. Kinston?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Kinston Anderson, and I'm with Citywide Training Development Department, where we provide a lot of training development services. And I'm looking forward to spending a lot of time with you all and facilitating these some great work group discussions. I already know it's going to be an amazing time. So first question I got is, what are your initial thoughts as it relates to the last 3 sessions now? So you've been at 3 sessions for our committee members. What are your initial thoughts on, and what are you thinking now that you've experienced a few of them? And anyone can go.
Mark?
Yeah, I think my initial thought, and I went home after every session to my wife and talked about a lot of this. As a former legal aid attorney, she's heavily invested in a lot of the things y'all are talking about. And what I told her that really is amazing. First of all, the knowledge, the information I'm getting just as a retail guy, coffee guy, I can actually digest it. Sometimes I have to drill down a little bit and look a few things up and all of that. But over the last 20 some years, I've been on lots of committees. I've been fortunate enough to work with tons of folks in the city, and there's always great people. But this one, to a person, seemed to me the way this work looks like it's going to go is there is a determination. And I just thought that was amazing, and a determination to get it right and to make the new normal for the vulnerable among us better. And as a coffee guy, I can just say, if folks who are vulnerable end up into the workforce, end up progressing on to be housed, to have food and all of those things, the first thing they do when they have some extra cash is do stuff like go to a restaurant, go to a coffee shop. And I always say, if you give $4 to someone who doesn't have much, they will take care of the things they need to take care of and spend the rest. But if you give $4 to a billionaire, they will just invest it in something they already have. So
thanks for sharing, Mark.
That has been amazing.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
This is Sandy. I'll jump in. I was raising my little tiny electronic hand there, so sorry.
Sorry.
Or my little mini hand. I would say I appreciate all the information. I probably echo some of what Mark had to say about the information. My one, I don't know if it's an ask or just a comment, and I know those of you who know me are not going to be surprised by this comment, but I know we're shoving a lot in. I was a little concerned last time when we had food security and housing in the same session. Those are such massive topics for our community, and I was a little concerned that we weren't able to get into a little more deep dive, and I would have liked to have seen those separated. Having said that, I totally respect this process. I realize it's hard, but I think we're going to end up having to come back to both of those likely down the road in a relatively robust way.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Ken, it's Mike Stevens.
Hey, Mike.
I think the point Sandy made is really good. And to share with the committee, as we kind of put together the plan for this, we wanted to be respectful of your time, and we tried to, we wanted the learning piece to be meaningful, but we didn't want to spend months in that time period. But I get a sense from the discussion today and the takeaway I had from last week when we took two really big topics and combined them and felt kind of rushed in that. We might want to take a little bit more time in this first phase and separate and do, just have one topic and have a more robust discussion like we've had today. So I would be interested to hear what the committee feels about that. Because it's your time that we're trying to respect, but it needs to be meaningful.
Yep.
So I have one thought sorry, I'm Karen Mosener. I have one thought in response to that is the thing that it would give us more time for is for the people who are on the committee who have expertise in these areas to also contribute more. And that we haven't had a lot of time for that. So I think that would be an added benefit.
Yeah, agreed. Other thought?
Yeah, agreed.
I would say, Michael here, sorry, I would just agree as well that I think in some of those areas, especially like we're talking about with housing, other issues that are very core, definitely a little bit more of a deep dive into those is helpful. I realize this is just the learning phase of a lot of it. And all of us have various levels of expertise in different things. And so I've tried to limit questions and absorb more and all of that. But it wouldn't hurt. I think I would agree that, to have a little bit more time for the committee to actually have some conversation around it before we start deep diving into things, when we split up. But I don't think that would hurt at all. But really overall, I think the informational sessions have been great. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to get our next few topics, and Mike and Hannah and I and Ken have been talking about this. We've got government, digital inclusion, accessible mobility options, high growth venture development, travel, tourism, and cultural institutions. So, all big, meaty kind of, topics that, you could spend quite a bit of time on. So, we should definitely go back and, take a look at that. It just may mean that, we have a few more meetings into January before we get into the working groups. And I'm sure that Council President, County Commissioner O'Grady, and the mayor want us to do this the right way and to take our time. And so if people are willing to, add a few more meetings, then we can push some things a little bit and give, because, just today, the discussion we've been able to have has been, it's been a great discussion. Lots of people have been able to weigh in and such. So we will definitely take that back and go back and as a team to take all of that into account. Ken, I'll turn it back over to you. Sorry.
Okay. No, this is good, and it makes sense. So the next question I will have is, or would ask is, what would you like to see more of or more less of for the next groups that are coming?
So one of the things that I appreciated from the folks that we've seen thus far is when they came in, presented where their individual spheres of influence were at, but then also presented recommendations. I think understanding, what the people that are experts in this space are recommending is going to be really important, because I do think that there is a very real possibility that we could get just lost in the data and lost in all of the problems and trying to solve everything with one magic bullet solution. That having some concrete recommendations from the people who are doing the work every day, all day, is really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Candace.
This is Tashia Safford. I think for me, having pre-reads, if they're able to send the deck prior to, it gives us an opportunity where we can be responsive versus reactive. It's a lot of information to take on, as we all know that this is a very heavy lift. And if we're not able to have the pre-read, then the after read, because you're trying to listen intently, ask questions. If you're like me, you're taking notes. On your OneNote today, I'm on the pad, but having information to reflect back to after our sessions definitely would be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
At Kinston, Keith Stevens' question.
Yep.
And this may just be a lack of my being part of the first session, but one of the things I understand across, whether it's small business or it's individuals, especially in light of COVID, is financial literacy. And I'm wondering, does that live under one of these buckets? Is that even part of the agenda that we're going to address?
And I will open that up. Christy, any thoughts?
Yeah. There is, Keith, there's some financial literacy kind of it's woven into certain topics, but it's not in its own topic at this point. But, there'll be elements of that. But we do not at this point have it as its own topic.
Okay. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was curious in knowing in regards to childcare. I see it on the framework or in the phase 1, but I haven't really heard a lot about childcare throughout, or don't even see it on any discussion. So is there going to be any more information about how childcare is impacting all of these areas?
That's something that Mike and Hannah and I need to go back to and do a follow-up on. We thought some of it was going to be embedded in some of the job readiness conversation, the workforce conversation. So that's something we need to go back to the drawing board on and see if we need to add a session on childcare. Thank you, Melissa. Other thoughts? Kinston, sorry.
No.
This is Denise.
Nope, you were my question. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Denise.
Can you hear me? This is Denise.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
So I was just going to make a comment about the financial literacy, because yesterday we did a webinar with the Women's Commission and Council President Pro Tem Brown, and so that financial roadmap is out there, and we can share that with this committee, number one, because it had some really good information. But my question is totally opposite, is how do we get into different groups? How will we be grouping later? Because I agree with everyone. This is a lot of information, number one. Number two is I'm good for adding a couple of more days if we have to do that to get the depth of all the information. But how are we going to be grouped when we go and dive deep and peel back the onion layers?
We're going to draw straws. No, I'm just playing. We're going to count off. We haven't gotten that far, Denise. Quite frankly, we've thought about it in various ways based on people's expertise, but then we know different people have interests. So we're going to bring a proposal back to you as we get closer to, the end of our sessions, to see if it works for how people want to, get into groups. We certainly don't want to, assume people want to be in, certain groups, right? Sometimes people want to work in an area that maybe they don't work in every day and things like that. So we'll bring a proposal back to everyone and see if it works, and go from there. So we want people to be in a group that makes, that where you're interested, and you really want to, and some of us could be in multiple groups. I'm sure we're all like, oh, I could be in that group or I could be in that group. So, we want to make sure that it works for you as well as works for the process. But if you have any ideas and thoughts, feel free to share them too.
I will share with you. I will share with you if I do.
We appreciate that. So is there any other comments, concerns, or suggestions before we hit that 5 o'clock mark?
I just have one question before we hit it. Will there be a time and place where some of the things we're doing becomes public? I know you want to be able to have something to show. I mean, we don't want to just have 5,000 painters painting the house. But do you guys have a plan for how we begin to communicate with our neighbors on what we're working on?
Mike, I'm going to turn that over to you and Hannah.
Thanks, Christy. Mark, I appreciate the question. Yeah, ultimately, at the end of phase 2, we want to be able to present to the mayor, city council, and the county commissioners a set of recommendations that also identifies those solution providers that could help participate in those recommendations, and then have this group get together on what we call phase 3 on a quarterly basis, just to get updates on the progress of that. I think I don't know if it makes sense to do an interim report going into phase 2, but there's a little bit of we're building this airplane as we fly it. So having this input from the committee, if there's things that you'd like to see, we're definitely open to that.
Yeah. And I will remind everyone that the meetings are public meetings. So they are posted, I believe, on the city's website. Everything's recorded. So, certainly, I mean, I have talked about this work and the work that we're doing, the areas that we're looking at. And if, you can certainly share that and share if someone wants to kind of tune in, and even, to maybe is interested in a particular topic, they can tune in and hear and kind of see the sausage making process, if you will, because everything is public record.
Christy,
all of the meetings. Oh, sorry. I was going to say all the meetings are streamed live on Facebook Live on the city's page and also on YouTube Live and on CTV. Our team sends out a media advisory with that information each week. So, and then I send the link to the recording that's listed on YouTube following up. So there are ways to watch it live and both share that link with your friends and colleagues afterwards.
This is Elizabeth. I just wanted to offer, as we've heard presentations on the different focus areas and the discussion around challenges has emerged. One of the things that we've heard that, probably is not a surprise to the committee here is many of the challenges were pre-existing challenges. And I think to the comment you made earlier, Christy, in terms of two things. One, not wanting to reinvent the wheel, but also understanding that innovation is going to be required as we think about recommendations moving forward, that perhaps having the benefit, in addition to local recommendations, to look at cities that have been able to demonstrate progress in some of these areas that might be worthy of consideration as we think about solutions moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. 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 Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Kinston?
Yeah, so that was my last question, but we sent the questions out to you all. So please respond back to Hannah if you have more responses, as we definitely want to make sure that you're still tracking with us and that we're engaged, and we appreciate everything that you've done and that you're doing as we move forward to the next sessions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you.
Back to you, Christy.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you
for being with us today. Mike, I want to kick it over to you. And I think you might have some closing comments as well. My closing comments are, I want us all to be safe and healthy through our Thanksgiving holiday. That is on my mind because of the time that we're in, and also, just everyone here knowing all the work that you all do in your day job, so to speak. And, of course, this is volunteer service. I want to thank you for doing that and for saying yes, but also remind you to do have some self-care during this time, especially because we can't all gather. We can't do the things that we used to do, or hopefully we'll be doing them next year. So a little bit of self-care can go a long way, whatever self-care looks like to you. And I want to, I wish that for all of you, and I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Christy. There's not much more I can add. I think that was great. I want to thank this group, and I also want to thank you for understanding from a staffing perspective that we're trying to be as agile as possible as we move this forward. So we're delivering not only for your thoughts and needs of the committee, but for what we're going to provide to the community. So thank you, and everyone stay safe and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Curfew starts tomorrow. Don't break curfew.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, city team.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.